From all the fret and fever of the day, let there be moments when we turn away, and deaf to all confusing outer din, intently listen for the voice within. In quietness and solitude, we find the soundless wisdom of the deeper mind. With clear, harmonious purpose, let us then bring richer meaning to the world again. Welcome. We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. Good morning. Welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Jessie Sanchez, and I am the chair of the Sunday Services Committee. My committee works to provide an engaging Sunday morning experience for those who attend in person or online. This morning, we are fortunate to have member speaker Elizabeth Knight with us. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. After the service, we invite you to gather at the back of the meeting house and possibly outside, weather permitting. When indoors, we are observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. Religious education classes are being held in the social hall during the service, and an usher can direct you there if you need to know where that location is. And I wanted to make a point about the joys and sorrows today. You can either share at the microphone, you can also fill out the blue card that's in the pews, or you can text me, and unfortunately, the number on page 2 of the order of service is not correct. My phone number is 248-890-0419 if anybody wants to text me a joy or sorrow. As we begin our service, we remember that our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientations, gender identities, and shared belief systems. Please join me in stating our mission. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, live with compassion. And I believe we have quite a few announcements this morning, so I can start. So I just have a couple of fundraising announcements today. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that the Old West themed auction, service auction, is going to be Saturday, September 17th. It will be live in person, and we're going to have it, I believe, outside, weather permitting again. And it starts at 7 p.m. Dinner is at 6. So if you need more information, there's, I think, a couple of announcements about it in the e-blasts. We also have a fundraising event for Panera. So this, I believe it's this Friday from 4 to 8 p.m. If you go in person to the Panera and give them, show your flyer. I know there's a couple copies around. I think it's also in the e-blast where you can print out a copy and take it with you. And then we get a good percentage, 20% to the church from any orders that you do at Panera. It's a specific location. It's the one right over here on 12 Mile. So if you need more information, again, that's in the e-blast. You can also do online ordering. And I believe after people order their food, a group will join here around 6 or 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock to eat food, the food that they ordered together. Kind of a little bit of a community event. So, and then I think we also wanted to announce that the summer picnic is coming up. That's going to be August 7th at Drake Sports Park. And it should start pretty much right after service. So I believe that there's going to be hot dogs provided, but it'll be a potluck. So if you would like to bring a dish to pass, that would be great. And I think there's going to be lawn games and other fun things and activities for people to participate in. So, yep. And then I think Bev has an announcement.
Hi, I'm Bev Church, and I'm secretary of the Executive Board. And I have a special announcement this morning that on behalf of the Executive Board, I'd like to honor one of our members with our Unsung Hero Award, which recognizes members who go above and beyond in making a difference in our church community. And over the past 9 months, this hero has spent countless hours behind the scenes guiding the church through a much-needed technology upgrade. He submitted detailed proposals for upgrading the computers and software in the front office, as well as a state-of-the-art audiovisual system here in the meeting house. He purchased, installed, tested, and trained the staff and volunteers. The upgrades made life a lot easier for our congregational administrator, our finance volunteers, and our sound technicians. It's also improved the viewing experience for those who watch our service online. So please join me in thanking our unsung hero, Jamie Sanchez.
Thank you for all your announcements. Appreciate it. Our first hymn, please rise as you're willing and able for our first hymn, 188 in the gray hymnal. Come, come, whoever you are, and we're going to sing it 3 times. Elizabeth Knight is the current board president of UUCF and returning speaker to the pulpit. She has 2 elementary-aged boys and is married to an educator. When she's not volunteering here at UUCF, she coaches Little League, watches birds outside her office window, and binge reads series from her local library. Please welcome Elizabeth Knight.
Good morning. So I'll tell you a little bit about the journey of how I got to the topic of strangers later on, but for a bit of reflection before we get started, it's funny, a lot of my sources are journalists and studies and researchers, and so one of the sources I'm working off of is this book called The Power of Strangers, I'll talk about later. But in it, he cites 2 quotes that I thought were very interesting from a book called The Intimate History of Humanity. The first is about hospitality. A new phase of history begins when ancient and simple hospitality is succeeded by a deeper hospitality. That happens when people become hospitable to strange ideas, to opinions they have never heard before, to traditions that seem totally alien to them, when encounters with the unknown modify their view of themselves. This is a deeper hospitality because it is not just politeness, but involves admitting new ideas and emotions temporarily into one's mind. The second is more metaphorical. It talks about infectious disease from the same book, but still leans on this idea of strangers. The discovery of how the immune system works has shown that every individual is ceaselessly building up resistance to the unfriendly outside world, and that each has got to do it both independently and in concert with others. It is now clear that everyone needs small doses of foreign bodies, that in order to survive side by side with others, it is necessary to absorb a minute part of them. It is impossible to cut oneself off or to destroy one's enemies forever. Curiosity about others can no longer be thought of as a luxury or a distraction. It is indispensable to one's existence. When Diane and I picked out music, we talked about different themes, and sitting up here listening to that, I think it's so fitting to have such a familiar song to so many before a topic I'm going to talk about, unfamiliar. So a few years before the pandemic, I made a New Year's resolution to talk to more strangers, which originally started out as a mindfulness activity. It was a way to make myself more present in my daily life, especially when I was out shopping. Whether it was the cashier or another shopper, I made sure to put down my phone and find ways to connect with others. I didn't have any goals of making new friends, and I wasn't trying to find a hot date, but I did think there was some room to improve my awareness of the world around me, starting with my interactions with people in the community. And as you would know it, I found conversations, while short, lifted my energy. I found myself enjoying the people around me, customers and employees, Shopping became more enjoyable, more pleasant. And I stopped finding myself being concerned with a long checkout line and instead tried to brighten other people's days with simple pleasantries, asking them about themselves, thanking them graciously for extra attention or care in bagging groceries. And despite the old adage that no one follows their New Year's resolution, I found myself continuing to talk to strangers wherever I went long into that year and after. Now, after 2 years of working from home and the general isolation of pandemic life, I once again find myself trying to pull away from this electronic crutch in my hand when I'm out in public. Just last week, I found myself standing in line at Starbucks. To be honest, it's a place I rarely go to, and I'm really just overwhelmed and intimidated by the whole ordering system, wondering what I was going to order. There were 3 other people in line with me, and for a moment, I thought of asking the woman next to me to ask her what she was getting, but I hesitated. And instead, I just fumbled through ordering the special on the menu because it was on a big sign staring at me in the face. Now, after having such a good experience previously, why did I hesitate talking to a stranger? One word: fear. Fear of rejection, fear of looking inept, like who doesn't have a standard Starbucks order at this day and age? The fear of breaking up social norms to ask a stranger for a recommendation. Even if I had spoken up, that interaction would have lasted 10 seconds? So where does such a fear come from? Sure, you all remember the propaganda, the 80s and 90s. Don't talk to strangers, right? Very catchy tagline. Did you know that today, actually, child psychologists and pediatricians discourage that notion? Citing that actually teaching kids carte blanche to don't talk to strangers can be more harmful than helpful. Instead, now they favor teaching kids when it might be okay to talk to strangers, like another parent at the playground, or a teacher, or a security guard if they're lost and need help. So, following this change in message, there's actually now been several initiatives across the globe to teach individuals, namely grown adults now, how to talk to strangers. Whether to help them build social skills, help tackle a community's concern with, say, an emerging immigrant population, or how to bridge gaps on communication between political parties. Jason Pfeiffer, journalist and host of the podcast Build for Tomorrow, featured many of these studies in his episode, Yes, Talk to Strangers. I first listened to this episode a year ago, and its familiarity to my successful New Year's resolutions inspired the basis of my talk today. In the episode, he covered the studies, various studies, but also referenced a book by Joe Keohane called The Power of Strangers. It was from these sources that I found my positive experience with my New Year's resolution was not unique to me. In the similar exercises that had been done in London and cities across the US, college campuses, participants were asked to talk to strangers, varying, demographics, varying circumstances, varying topics. But across the board, while most had fear of rejection going into the study, coming out, they found that almost 100% of the time they were able to make small, meaningful conversations with strangers. And, interestingly enough, the researchers found that both the participant and the stranger enjoyed the interaction. Keohane argues that talking to strangers is an integral part of our genetic makeup as humans, starting with our closest evolutionary ancestors, the chimpanzees and the bonobos monkeys. Now, as a short summary, both chimpanzees and bonobos shared a genetic ancestry until a time in history when they were divided by a body of water. The chimpanzee's habitat at the time was rough, survival was difficult, which over time made the species more aggressive and territorial in order to survive. By contrast, the bonobos' habitat was less challenging, and over time they developed more inclusive behaviors indicative of community and socialization. Facial features in bonobos are typically defined as being more feminine than chimps. They're more expressive like our own human faces. And through studies, bonobos continue to demonstrate empathy for others. Bonobos' births are often social events, with other females helping and protecting the mother-to-be. This is the only species, aside from humans, known to assist others in birth. They're also found, bonobos, to share food with a stranger over another member of their own group, even when there's no reward for doing so. By contrast, chimpanzees very much reward-driven to demonstrate empathetic behaviors. And mature female bonobos in the wild eventually leave their own group to find a mate in another group, ultimately being welcomed into that community despite being a stranger. In our anthropologic history, humans also started our journey in tribal groups where survival was difficult. But the shift from hunter-gatherer to agricultural society made us more open to strangers. At the advent of agriculture, surplus males from tribes, typically former hunters, were the ones who first began to travel from community to community, trading favors or skills or knowledge. And over time, small tribes became settlements, we started to trade, and suddenly strangers were very important. Building a strong network of strangers across communities made our world safer and easier to survive. As modern society grew, many religions and cultures start to tell stories of gods appearing as stranger, encouraging and welcoming those strangers. I'm sure you've heard many in your own faith tradition or your culture, but there's, of course, the Greek tale. I'm going to butcher this, so if you're into Greek, come find me and tell me how to do it later. Philemon and Baucis, a pious couple who welcomed Zeus and Hermes, who were disguised as wayfarers when richer neighbors turned them away. As a reward, they were saved from a flood that drowned the rest of the community. Tolstoy shares the more Christian tradition of taking care of a stranger in his short story, Where Love Is, God Is, in which a shoemaker dreamt that the voice of God said he would visit the next day. But instead, the shoemaker just sees and helps 3 people over the course of the day, only later realizing that providing help and compassion to others, he's also helping God. And in modern-day India, whether Buddhist, Hindu, or Jain, there's a common saying, Atithi Devo Bhava, meaning the guest is God. These examples from the world demonstrate the value of hospitality to a stranger as a core tenet of human civilization. I know families here at UUCF who have welcomed exchange students into their home. Our church's social justice work often involves working with refugees, including our past bottle cap bench project that we collected several years ago for Freedom House, as well as our current social justice t-shirt quilt project. You might have seen a slide earlier. So while I, and maybe you too, feel out of practice after 2 years of surviving a pandemic, humans, we're naturally inclined to talk to strangers. But we still have to get through that fear component I spoke of earlier, right? How do we get through that? How do we approach strangers without looking like a weirdo or a creep or somebody with an ulterior motive? In Pfeiffer's podcast, while he mentioned several different ideas, he names his top 3 favorite ways to talk to strangers. First one, he recommends acknowledging you're breaking social norms, speaking up in the first place. This signals to the other person that you're not unaware of the social norms or expectations for that particular situation, right? In his thing, I think he talks a lot about public transportation, right? In the city, commuters, heads down, 6 a.m., don't talk to anybody. Then, after you've acknowledged breaking your social norms, make a statement or an observation, and then follow up, finally, with a connection or a justification, a reason you initiated the conversation. So in my Starbucks scenario, this might look like, oh, hey, I don't mean to be a bother, but God, your drink looks delicious. Can you recommend a drink? I don't come here often. I really don't know what to order. Secondly, his second suggestion, Pfeiffer recommends breaking the script with specificity. Phrases like, oh, hey, how are you? Seem like a good intro, but they're standard lines, and we have standard responses for that. Even if I ask acquaintances I work with, oh, hey, how are you? I've known them for years. I still get stock responses like, I'm living the dream, or oh, good. Flat, right? So don't ask what someone does for work. Ask them, hey, where's the best place to get a bar burger around here? Or when someone asks you how your day is going, answer with an unusual specific, like, hey, great, my kids are finally old enough to start cooking for me instead. Studies show that when you start a conversation with something unusual, you actually push the other person to mirror or follow along with you that line in order to foster a connection. And the last suggestion is to ask open-ended questions. This actually forces you to give control to the other person and requires you to really listen to them, to be engaged and keep the conversation going. When camping last month, I actually did the last with our campsite neighbors. But to be honest, I didn't initiate the conversation. The woman from the next site did, but she started us off with an unusual and specific question. We're still getting unpacked, and she goes, "Did you move from another site?" Meaning, did I move from somewhere else in the campground to next to her? So that seemed really out of the blue at the time. I mean, we'd just shown up to this campground. But it shifted my brain to listen and engage with her. So let's start with, what do you mean? Well, turns out she saw we had crepe paper decorations on the wheels of our bikes from 4th of July. She thought we had celebrated the 4th of July at that campground because they had a bike parade, when in reality we're actually at our second campground of the trip. The first campground we had a bike parade. But when we started talking, I started asking him open-ended questions and listened. In about 5 minutes, I learned he was retired, she was working, what they did for work, that they had grandkids that visited him at the campground. We shared commonalities about our dogs, the unreliable Wi-Fi, and some details about another campground we have planned for August. Campgrounds are great places to talk to strangers with much less pressure than normal. Everyone is there temporarily, and for the most part, you're sharing a common experience. It's easy, even at 7 a.m. in your pajamas, to talk to another dog owner out for a morning stroll. Lots of places you might go, you're going to share that common experience and that temporary piece that allows you to have sort of an unrestricted, less stressful conversation with strangers. I think that's what makes the store such an interesting, attractive place for this for me. But when thinking about that first suggestion on having a reason or a connection to start a conversation, it is easier to visually identify people who are like us and then reach out. They have a dog, I have a dog. They have kids and they're shopping for birthday presents, I have kids, I'm shopping for birthday presents. But what about people who we visually believe to be not like us? Or worse, a person we categorize as a them. Now, we all have a them category up here. It may be an ugly thing we keep to ourselves, but that them is in our brains, and we carry those unspoken biases with us out into the world. Would I have been that chatty if the campers next door were flying a sign or a flag I didn't agree with or support? Not an uncommon thing to see in the campground. I have that choice in front of me everywhere I go. My favorite Christian Judeo parable is the story of the Good Samaritan, which, interestingly enough, I was talking to my dad this week, was on rotation in Catholic churches last week, so look at me, so timely. You've likely all heard it, but for a quick recap for someone, if you're not familiar with it, the tale goes like this. A traveler was found beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. 3 different people passed him, but it was only the third, the Good Samaritan, who stopped to help. Now, the reason I love this story is not because of the traditional allegorical message you've probably heard before, to aspire to be like the Good Samaritan, the helper. But instead, I like it because of who each player is in the historical context of the tale. The traveler is understood to be a Jewish man. That was the audience at the time, so left, beaten, and dead. The first 2 passerbys were a priest and a Levite. Both were members of the Jewish religious establishment. And lastly, the Samaritan was a man of a religious faith that was despised of by the Jews and therefore would have been a them to the traveler. So, think of that in today's context. To the Jews listening to the tale, the Samaritans were a them. Who is your them? A person who supports a political party you disagree with? Maybe you place a them category on believers of a religious tradition you left behind in your youth. Maybe you them a certain age group or a culture or a community you don't understand because it feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar. So how do you connect with, or in the position of the wounded traveler in the parable, accept help from a them? Talking to strangers is the number 1 way to break down the idea of a them that you have carrying in your head. When you make a positive one-on-one connection with a person who is unlike yourself, you build bridging capital in your own life, and the weaker the power that idea of them has on your world outlook. Our news stations, our friends, our social media, make it all too easy to get sucked into the comforting echo chamber of people who think like us. TikTok keeps suggesting me things that I like because it wants me to keep swiping my thumb up, right? YouTube suggests you things you like because they want you to watch the next video. If we don't make an effort to talk to strangers and instead stay within that comfort zone, doom scrolling away rather than choosing to interact with the real world, we run the risk of creating further and deeper divisions in our lives of an us versus them mentality. And the longer we separate ourselves from who a them actually is as a person, as a human, the greater our imagination will fill in those gaps. And I would wager you would agree your imagination is probably wrong. We are a cooperative species, and while we may be out of practice, we're still looking for connections when we hide behind those screens. Except when I'm scrolling TikTok in the checkout line, I don't have to worry about the fear of being rejected because content creators are putting their stories out there voluntarily. You and I are already listening to those stories. So are all the thems and strangers that might be standing around you. We are all listening to what's on here. So let's use our human biological hardwiring to make connections with others in real life. That mission statement we pledge each Sunday, right in your order of service, seek answers everywhere. Why not from strangers? So I challenge you today to step over your fear of rejection, that fear we all share, you, me, the stranger, the them, all of us. Because I think you'll find that that other person is looking to listen and connect as much as you are. For now, keep it brief, start small, and practice. Maybe start today. Talk up a person during coffee hour you wouldn't have talked to before. Or when you're out shopping later this week, start with a captive audience. That cashier ringing up your groceries, they're not going anywhere. And when you're ready to face your them, talk to a stranger with the compassion and willingness to listen, befitting of a member of this congregation. I would bet that your shopping trip and your day will become that much brighter. So for our moment of silence today, I want you to each think about the who you were thinking of, or the scenario, or the location you were thinking of as I was speaking. Did you see yourself maybe also at the grocery store, or out for a walk in the neighborhood with the same guy who walks his dog by every day, but you still haven't met his name or know where he lives quite yet, right? So close your eyes for a minute and think of a circumstance, a situation you might find yourself. Think of the person you might talk to. Think of how you might start that conversation. Think of what they might say. Think of what might happen if the conversation goes well. And if it doesn't, that's okay. There's other strangers to talk to.
Thank you very much, Liz. That was very, very good, engaging. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. The perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, please direct your energy, prayers, and meditations as a gift of compassion and strength. So I have one joy that was given. Hymn today is 311 in the gray hymnal, Let It Be a Dance. Please rise as you are willing and able, and we will sing all the verses.
Our closing words is from sociologist George Simmel in his essay, The Stranger. The stranger is close to us insofar as we feel between him and ourselves common features of a national, social, occupational, or generally human nature. He is far from us insofar as these common features extend beyond him or us and connect us only because they connect a great many people.